There are growing calls for the embattled Unisa Vice-Chancellor in Principal Puleng LenkaBula to step down. This follows that damning findings against her since she took over the leadership of the institution in 2021. Let's get some reaction to that report now with Professor Barney Pityana, who is the former Vice-Chancellor at Unisa. Professor Pityana, thank you for making time for us this afternoon. What did you think of this report by Professor Themba Musia?
Good afternoon, Clement, and good afternoon to your viewers. It's an excellent report. It is well done, and it is detailed, it is thorough, it is backed up by interviews, by facts, by data. I really do think that Professor Musia needs to be commended. It's not an easy report to write, but at 300 pages, he went into painstaking detail on all the aspects of the appointment that he got from the Minister of Higher Education.
Yeah. There are those who argue that the Vice-Chancellor, Puleng LenkaBula, is being targeted here. They believe that these problems at Unisa, the collapse of governance and management, did not begin with her. So many are saying, well, these problems that are raised in this report actually predate her.
No, it didn't. Not all of them predate her. I mean, the problems with accountability, with the expenditures, and the fact that she is making demands and commands that are not backed by policy at all. She behaves in a very unaccountable manner. Those were not the problems of the previous Vice-Chancellor. I think Professor Musia is fair enough to say that Professor LenkaBula did assume an institution that had enormous problems. And indeed, Professor Makhanya himself testifies to the fact that Professor Makhanya, was summoned to a meeting where the collapse of the council was imposed upon him. And new people were brought. I think that was about 2015. So to that extent, it is true. But however, if Professor LenkaBula found an ailing institution, she then did nothing to reverse the trend and instead aided and abetted the breaking up of the institution into the collapse that it has become.
When do you think things started getting wrong, Prof, at Unisa? You know, you had some people at some point saying, being a professor from Unisa, you were not taken seriously at some point.
I believe that to be the case. I think Professor Makhanya has got his finger on the pie on this one, because he says that in 2015, and he was just about to finish the first term of his term, the capture of the council and of the institution began in earnest. So that was a time when a new raft of members of council, the former members of council under Dr. Matthews Posa, were thrown out. The deputy chair, who was acting chair at that point, was thrown out. A whole raft of new members, most of them unqualified or underqualified, who were student activists not very long ago, basically took over the institutions. They took over council. They brought in a new chairperson of council who himself was just not qualified actually to lead the council of an institution this size. So the takeover and indeed the language of capture comes in here. So in many respects, the view I hold is that Professor LenkaBula, in a sense, in 2021, when a new VC was being sought, was brought in by this cabal. So she became an instrument in the hands of people who were really taking over the council and repurposing the university for their own needs, away from the academic project and mandate that the university has, changing its mandate to the concern of the minister, multiplying its student numbers, and really being free with tenders and expenditure. So in a sense, Professor LenkaBula's conduct was very much in keeping with the conduct of the members of the council.
So what do you think needs to be done then to fix this? There's likely going to be an administrator that's appointed, but to completely fix things, they're going to need a lot of support.
And a lot of time. My view is that Unisa is a huge institution. Normally, the administrator comes in for a year or two. But in an institution like Unisa that is broken from top to bottom at the moment as we speak, we need immediately the appointment of an administrator. The administrator must come with a team of experts right from the word go, and the administrator must actually be allowed to stay in the institution for 3 to 5 years, and then be able to look for a new vice-chancellor. The first thing that the administrator must do is to bring the current vice-chancellor to discipline. And there's enough reasons to remove the vice-chancellor, but the vice-chancellor cannot just be removed without a process. And the administrator's task would be to do precisely that. The Professor Musia, the independent assessor, says that council as well as the executive must be removed. But the executive can't just be removed without legal process. And the people who can do that is not the minister. The minister can't remove the executives. The minister can't remove the vice-chancellor. But the administrator's first call on duty is to suspend the vice-chancellor immediately and to take disciplinary action against the vice-chancellor.
Yeah. This report has revealed that there was a lot of money that was spent in upgrading and renovating the home of the current vice-chancellor. And I see that some of the academics, even outside of Unisa, that are supporting the vice-chancellor are questioning whether or not she is directly linked to this amount of money, particularly the 3 million rand on upgrading the residents in the context of the financial, financial needs of many students. There are those who say, well, this is not the first time that so much money is being spent to renovate the home of a vice-chancellor. As a former vice-chancellor yourself, are you aware of just how normal apparently this is?
No, it's not. It's not normal at all. For example, there was a budget of 1 million rand for the refurbishment. It was not upgrading, it was much more refurbishing the residence for the occupation of a new vice-chancellor, which is a normal thing that happens. But actually, more than 3 million rand was spent. And there is enough reason to take the view that the vice-chancellor herself in person was responsible for the overspend on the budget. The second thing that you need to say is that it is not normal for the vice-chancellor on her own to determine that she is going to get a kind of car. There was a provision that was made for a car of 1.2 million rand. And the vice-chancellor insisted on a car that was in fact 1.9 million rand. There's no evidence of any authorization, any approval of any of those expenditures. When I became vice-chancellor, there was no residence for the vice-chancellor, because the residence had been, the historic residence had in fact been sold by Professor Melk without the council's knowledge. And so the council then, having decided that it was important for the vice-chancellor to occupy the official residence, which the previous two vice-chancellors had decided not to occupy it because they lived elsewhere in Pretoria and it made sense for them. And by the time I came, I had my own home in Johannesburg, and I was told that I would need to occupy the residence as a condition of employment. And the council then decided to reclaim the residence and to stop the sale as best they could. And because it had not been occupied for a long time, the residents actually did need a considerable amount of upgrading and cleaning up and that sort of thing during my time. Now, as a result of that, an asset of the university was preserved, which would have been lost at that time.
Okay, Professor.
So it's not the situations are not compatible.
Yeah. No, Prof, thank you for making time for us. Professor Barney Pityana is a former Vice-Chancellor himself at Unisa. Still